Yes, that's right. Thank you for coming. So I was saying, I'll just recap I did a really quick introduction to what I was going to be saying that you weren't here. So thank you so much for coming to hear my musings about trauma. The biggest thanks goes to you guys booking on, because you're obviously having had some experience of trauma or some understanding already. So you're coming to not only share our purpose and our views and our thoughts about trauma in the workshop, but also because you're investing in yourself and your own journey. So thank you for coming to do that with us. I'll talk for between 20 and 30 minutes now about what I feel is a lifetime's work on trauma, and I feel it's what I'm supposed to be doing here in this lifetime. Is very much part of my purpose. So I'm writing a book on this topic at the moment as well, and applying to do TED Talks, which is why I'm recording it. So thanks for coming to hear about it. I'll start with a little bit of my background and experience, my current role and my previous role, and then I'll talk about some personal traumas. I'm not going to go into a huge amount of details in them, but I'm going to give you an overview of them, just really to give a context of where I'm coming from, and then how I've kind of still processing and healing from that, and how actually it's become part of my work to share the gifts from the trauma. It's a really important thing for me, and if that inspires others, then great. But I also know that all of us will be coming here today with our own stories. So I'm really mindful that if anything's triggered, as Sharon mentioned earlier, if you need any time out, or if you need any support, just shout, or if there's anything we can do, or if you need to take some time out, then please do. So I am currently working in holistics. So I'm a Reiki master teacher, teaching to do treatments in Reiki, soon to be a aromatherapist, and astrology and tarot and all the fluffy things. But my background is drug and alcohol work with young people, which I did for 15 years as part of the offending team and Checkpoint over in Torquay, and the youth service. Back even before that, it was Torbay Youth Service. They've folded now. But my background is working with kids really with trauma, ages 10 to 17, 10 to 18, and that was really rewarding, interesting work that I loved. I was also very personally connected to it, because my background before that is I grew up with an alcoholic parent. So even from young, I knew in the way that I could articulate at that time that I wanted to be working to help those who had been in my situation. So that's my kind of that was my personal drive, if you like. So my experience with drugs and alcohol, I can't remember life ever without it present. So my earliest memories are around when alcohol and drugs were present in the house. My mum, I was very, very blessed to have a mum who loved me dearly. I was very loved, but because of her own needs, she wasn't able to be safe. She didn't provide a safe environment because of her own alcohol use. So she was very chronically dependent on alcohol, and this meant that although she was loving, it wouldn't be consistent. There were men in the property, there was parties, there were all sorts of things going on that made it not safe, and often neglect is a big part of that for people with alcoholic parents. So that was a big feature, if you like, of my day-to-day life, and just my normal, really. And unfortunately, sexual abuse was present because of the men in the property, and lots of different traumas in that respect that I'll explain later from a bit more of a processing point of view, but lots of different things happen that shouldn't happen. Later, one of the biggest traumas, if you like, and probably the more recent one, when I was 19, my mum actually had like a 3-day bender and got into the bath, fell asleep and drowned, and that was where I found her a number of hours later. So that was really huge in terms of trauma, and how trauma as a shock state trauma, not just the experience, but trauma is a shock state that the body goes through to process and survive that experience. So that's been quite a pinnacle point for me, not only in terms of losing her, but also it did two things. So it was, really difficult from the loss perspective, really difficult from a child losing their parent, but also about 3 months later, I just had this huge impetus. It was like a fork in the road, appeared to me very clearly in my mind's eye and in physical, that you can either go the same way as her. I was drinking a lot, I would take any drug that was handed to me, I was a complete mess. And that first 3 months, I think I drank solidly. I think I was drunk for 3 months. So that was my way of dealing with the trauma and the shock state. So, but then it came of, you can carry on doing this and go the same way, or you can do something different. And I was compelled to start working with young people, and that was my way out, really. So I threw myself into my career. I went rock climbing instructing. I got into that route, taking groups out, started with youth work a bit, and ended up qualifying as a rock climbing instructor through getting out and a seasonal work with a job in France, and then came back to Brixton and started all the youth work stuff. So, but it was so evident to me that this is, your choice, your opportunity, or you can stay the same, So that's, in a real nutshell, my background in trauma, personally and professionally, and why it's so sort of dear to my heart, really. And because I, of course, would prefer to have a mum. I would, of course, prefer to have a stable, safe, nurturing experience. Whilst that is the case, I can 110% resonate that it was all supposed to happen. You don't think, yeah, great, I enjoyed all that, but I 100% feel that it's brought me to where I am today. So I know that's, in some ways, it can be, you can sometimes feel it's not much of a consolation saying, well, it's meant to be, well, it's destiny, but actually there's been so many gifts that have come through the pain and the processing. So many things I feel have been gifted to me through the processes of having been what I've been through. So that's sort of another driving factor within me that wants, as well, want to share a message, as well, and hopefully inspire other people to find the things that they think, that's a real gift, because actually it was horrendous going through that, but because I did X, Y, and Z have then happened. So how I've formulated the process, if you like, the healing process in my mind that's been quite apparent to me, is to think about 4 holistic bodies. So I'll just have a quick drink and I'll explain what I mean. You might want to journal this bit, because I know when we talked about it last time, which was the first time I talked about it, this is the bit that is perhaps a little bit more of a theory, if you like, of what I'm saying. So you can either journal it now or at the end, it's up to you. But so, how trauma works in the body. There's a lot of psychology in this that you may have already heard of, or you could read up on if you're interested. How the body is very clever in helping us to survive these traumatic circumstances is, you will have heard of fight or flight. So the brain, the mental body, so we start with the mental body, it goes into fight, flight or freeze. Now, in honesty with you, my sexual abuse, there was multiple occasions of, is still, some of it's still unclear from a mental level. I can't remember it all like a story, because my mind disassociated. So I would have numbed out, zoned out on a mental level to be able to cope with that level of trauma as a child. The body was very clever in doing that. So that's the mental body, the mental and cognitive, is the fight, or freeze, fight, flight or freeze. And that's that disassociation. So that's the mental level. Emotionally, the emotional body will numb. it will zone out. So the same thing, that disassociation, you can't really, I believe, feel into all your thoughts and feelings with that level of trauma because you're needing to survive. So there's a complete numbing out. And you might see this later I've seen this after, so you might see it in your own journey where if you've had a high level of trauma, you've been quite used to numbing out. You know, children, it's quite a classic one with children of alcoholics, you will have your own ideas, I'm sure, on different traumas and how you might think, wow, when something comes up where I feel like I'm going into survival mode, I might actually be numbing out a little bit, so kind of just disassociating. So that's the emotional body, numbing out. The spiritual body, so in terms of my opinion, the spirit, I feel my spirit actually left my body at different times in my life to go to another realm for safety. So you might hear it if you're in spiritual circles about soul retrieval and the inner child, you may or may not have heard of it, but it resonates with me, and I know how my soul and parts of my soul I've retrieved on a conscious level to the best of my abilities to where I am now. There'll be more growth I have to do because it never stops, but for where I am now, I know that I've had to retrieve consciously parts of my soul back because I'm now in a safe position, in a safe place in myself and my healing journey to have retrieved it, or retrieve parts of it back. So the soul goes, so for me, this was one of the massive gifts in terms of my spiritual connection. So because of that horrendous trauma, my soul leaving, my soul accessed other realms. So call me mad, call me, what you like, hippie, all of those things, which is fine. But the access to other realms has been a huge gift, and I'm a bit more comfortable up there sometimes than I am here. So leading on to the physical body, which the last of the four, for me, I need to consciously work on grounding because I'm quite comfortable up there, quite comfortable with spiritual vision and other places and other beings and light and angelic realms. I have to work harder to be here, to be present. So showering feet or mindful exercise, that kind of thing is just my go-to medicines. Essential oils, this is another reason why I work with holistic tools such as essential oils, because they're grounding. So for me as well, and you might start to think about your own trauma as you're talking, you might start to think about your own indicators in each of your four holistic bodies. For me, the pains in my physical body were what led me back to some of the memory of the abuse. So I'd be meditating and I'd get this recurrent pain in my groin, and I just have to keep going into it, like what's this trying to say? Because I understand that the physical body is often, when there's a symptom, it has a spiritual origin. I understand that. So I'd be getting these pains, and I'd eventually got taken back when I was safe to do so. So again, wherever you are in your healing journey, when you get a little bit more information on your traumas, it's credit to you, because that means you've done enough work on yourself at any point to be having information come back through, if that makes sense. So we can't possibly articulate all of this as a child. We come back to our healing path much later because we're able and we're safe, and we've created those safer spaces for ourselves, like you're all doing in your capacities now, by being here, by doing your own work, by all the things that I'm sure you'll be doing that help to keep you well. So the physical body was the one that led me back in terms of the pain indicator. So I was given some more memory. It's patchy, but I was given some more memory from the cognitive level, linked up with the physical body to help me to heal that a bit. Another level of healing happened because of that pain indicator. So that's kind of the four holistic bodies as it's given me understanding to help with my healing path. Interestingly, this work still goes on, and I think it always will, because we're always, becoming the next best version of ourselves. So we're always doing a bit more awareness and a bit more growth. interestingly, I think it was in 2017, I was chatting with another drugs worker, a colleague at the time in Checkpoint, and he hadn't heard the story about my mum, and we'd been working together a couple of years, and we were quite close, and I ended up telling him, and I said, totally genuinely, I said, I found her in the bath, and this was, after a couple of hours, obviously it was quite short. I said it was quite a bit of a shock. It was a bit of a shock, Stella, and I thought, wow, I'm still doing it, I'm still numbing out, so, which is the body doing what it's meant to do, and the mind and the emotions doing what they're meant to do to keep you surviving, but his reflection to me was, it was a bit of a shock, was like, wow, okay, I'm still quite desensitised to some of that, in a way of just I go about my day and this is what's happened and blah blah blah, and that's fine. That's great for functioning, but also for that awareness to go, okay, actually I've been through a lot. What do I need today? What do I need? How am I doing? So it's good to see those aspects see those unhealed aspects of yourself for more growth, I've found. So that's the 4 bodies as I've experienced them. I'm linking now to a 5th aspect, which is the collective consciousness. So to me, like number 5 here is the whole global energy of the collective consciousness. So I do work and think in terms of frequency. So our bodies, our thoughts, everything that has already been proven for a long time by science, if you like, is in frequency. We understand that already, we can measure it. So it's measured already by things like Kirlian photography. If you've heard of that, but there's pictures of, it's like aura, if you think of aura photography, you can see it's not just heat, but they can measure frequency and energy and take photographs of it now. That's actually been happening for quite a long time, I think it's the 70s. And that's not the only thing. So there's the Schumann resonance, so it's like the heartbeat of the earth has been measured, it's affected by weather patterns, that again has all been measured by science. So this isn't new, that's the frequency side of things is not new, it's just not as widely discussed perhaps as other things. But so it's, matter is discussed and thought about in tangible terms, which is also energy. But the things that are not seen have been measured for some time, just not as much talked about. So we understand that everything's frequency as a basic premise, and we also then can understand that we're energy too, and so our frequency and how we're keeping ourselves well has a ripple effect because we're all connected as energy. So an example of this in our wellness, for my wellness journey, it's getting in the sea. That keeps my vibration high, that keeps my frequency high. When I dip, which of course I do because I'm human, I'll go and get in the sea or do my oils or whatever things I need that day to lift myself back up. And that has a ripple effect on not only my kids and who I'm with and my work and what I'm doing that day, but also in terms of this whole global network of energy that we are. So that's the collective consciousness. Equally, there's changes that have been measured in frequency, again by scientists measured changes in frequency of imprints of things, of activity. When there's been big events like the wars and the Holocaust and things like that, will have had an imprint on the frequency level, because it's all, it's all affected, like a ripple effect. So that's the 5th body, if you like, that we're all a part of and connected to. What's really interesting with that, and in terms of the wellness journey and how we're starting to heal, I have found, is that initial bit when we access services or we access support from someone else and we connect by talking about our experience, which is really powerful when we're sharing our story, and that's so healing when we connect with someone else about it. And you will have probably all done that at some point in some capacity, spoke to someone else about an issue or a problem and had mutual support, particularly if it's someone who's been through the same thing or something similar. So that's really great, and I've done it as well. initially there's that really freeing sense of belonging because someone else has been through the same thing as you. And there's a TED talk that I really love that's called the opposite of addiction is not sobriety, it's connection. Because when we're connected as people, we are in our thriving state. You know, when we connect to a sense of belonging, when we feel really connected, that helps us to thrive as people. And addiction, for one example, is, you know, when we're trying to escape or we're unhappy inside, so we're feeling quite lost. But if we feel really connected, particularly to someone else and ourselves, then we're in quite a good healed space. So anyway, it's not about the opposite of addiction isn't being sober, it's about being connected, feeling well as people. But what's been quite interesting is when we can initially connect with someone and talk about an issue, say for example, let's change it up, domestic violence, sadly, we can talk to someone else about that and feel initially that support. So you're, you know, maybe a support group or maybe another woman that's going through the same thing, and that dialogue could be like, we are both victims of domestic abuse. Now that's great initially and that can be quite freeing, but what sadly is, though my experience come through, is that we are also taking on the entire weight of the human race's unhealed trauma. I know that sounds quite big and bold and a little bit strange at first, but what I've felt is that we're taking, because words have frequency as well, so we're actually taking on all the unhealed aspects about that, because trauma is the shock state, not the incident that has defined you. Trauma is the shock state. So when we stay connected with the incident, we're holding ourselves there in an unhealed space. So for example, like, you know, if I continue to frame my story purely around sexual abuse, and I'm a sexual abuse victim, I am, but if I continue to stay in that frequency of being victimised, then I'm limiting my own potential for growth. So it's not saying the thing hasn't happened, we're not denying anything, we're not acknowledging the pain and the process of it at all. We're just not staying in that place if that's all I am. Because actually I've moved on, or I'm moving on from there, I'm healing from that. So, you know, another example would be rape, similar thing, similar instance in my background. So, you know, the word rape is incredibly loaded with an entire weight of women, maybe men as well, who, you know, with that comes the disempowerment, the violation. And if you stay in that I am a rape victim language and space, then it doesn't give you the breadth and the freedom and the wisdom to be so much more than that, which is moving forwards for you, for your healing path. Does that make sense? Cool. So, yeah, so I had that as quite a surprise notion come through, that when you, how did it come through? Is you take on the entire weight of the human race's unhealed trauma when you connect with certain language. So it's about sharing the story is super positive and super powerful and super connecting, but we don't want to stay in that frequency of I am that. So it's beyond that. So the other thing that links to that, which has come through interestingly as well, is that memory is a tool of creation. We're often using memory and have been conditioned, have been very used to using the tool of memory as a tool of creation, but actually it's a tool of evolution. And what I mean by that is we, for example, we eat a mushroom and it makes us sick. We don't give the mushroom the meaning of why we got, you know, why we wouldn't do it again. We give the process. We learn from the process that we don't eat the mushroom again. don't give the mushroom all the power of that. We give ourselves the power of going, actually I've learned from that, so I know not to do it again, so I'm not going to eat that mushroom again. So it's quite, I've caught myself doing it recently, you know, spending time with certain people, and you can think, well, oh, I hope this doesn't happen again, I hope this doesn't happen again, really hope this doesn't happen again, when you could actually I ended up informing my day differently. I'm thinking, well, I'm going to create something different rather than repeating that experience. So memory is a tool of evolution, not a tool of creation. We don't create from past experiences to be the same. We choose to do something more evolved. It's what makes us different from animals, from, you know, cows, for example. We are evolving at a higher rate because we have that tool of memory for evolution. Does that make sense? Cool. So that's the kind of main body of the talk, really. And then what we're going to do in journals, but also I can put some bits up here, is in your own space, in your own, what feels comfortable. Nobody has to share it with you unless they want to. We're going to sort of maybe just ask you a few questions for you to jot down, and then maybe do some prompts for your own process. Now I've got Sharon helped me come up with this for thinking about a process to take away. So if things come up that you catch yourself maybe numbing out like I did, or repeating a pattern, or wanting to use a substance again, or whatever the thing is, then this is a good acronym for giving you a process to sit down and tangibly work with. Because otherwise it can all go on in your mind, and it can all go on in emotions, and you know, sometimes it's nice to have something. So we come up with tango, didn't we, Sharon, somehow?
It does.
Yes. It popped in as tango, and the T is for trauma. So that's you identifying which of my traumas does this relate to. So, say for example, I'll give you an example of me doing this process in real life to see if that helps. It's say I get scared of being hurt again, so I back away from somebody. I can think tango, okay, so trauma, what's this for? Okay, previous relationship, got really screwed over, I'll just shut down, I could either not do it, or I can think, oh yeah, that's because of the past trauma. So I'm using my memory for a tool of evolution. I'm not creating the same, not walking into something blindly, but I'm not creating from a repeating pattern. I can see why I'm identifying this trauma as having an issue now. Affected. What area is affected? Sorry, is everyone on T still, or? Just let me check. I can stay down if you need to. The A for affected is where is it in my body, and which body is it in? So for example, if you're having a niggling pain come up, what is that trying to tell you? Like mine was, like the groin one was quite a biggie linked to sexual abuse. Like it can end up that obvious. Or it could be something more emotional on the emotional side, like where you get a feeling of like, I want to back away, I'm scared, actually I want to go. What's that about? Is that for your highest good? Or is that a past fear or a past trauma blocking you from something good? So this is about self-awareness really. Sharon's body scan was really a good tool at this point that could be used. Like where is it in where can I feel it? Is it a physical, is it a mental, is it an emotional, or a spiritual? You can identify the part affected. So N for negative and positive. So where you've identified something, whatever it is, thought, feeling, or niggle, physical, you can then, how is this negative and positive is like how you know really. So it's like how is it affecting you? is it negative or is it positive? Is it a positive in that you have a gut feeling that says, actually, I'm not going to do the same pattern again. I'm not going to go for, using like examples of relationships, but I'm not going to go for a guy who I get a bad gut feeling about again. I'm not going to not listen to my gut feeling. Equally, so that can be a really positive thing. You're recreating a new pattern. The negative could be, you know, am I shying away from something out of fear? Because I've got fear, it's fear that's holding me back. You know, going for that new job, thinking that I deserve that amazing guy, thinking that I want to, I don't know, write a book. Whatever your thing is, how is your previous trauma affecting you positively or negatively? And then goals, so for you, so it might be, you know, if it's in a day, it might just be to get to 6 o'clock without smoking weed, to get to speak my truth today. It could be the next 3 months I want to see myself having applied for a couple of jobs. Whatever your goals are, but that they're achievable, that they're tangible, and that they're realistic, and that they're something that you are able to do. But that can be, you know, like I say, goals in a 5-minute window span or a 10-year span. And then options, it ends with options because it's like your choice to take on the action or not. So you always have a choice and an option in any moment to move forward or sit with yourself where you're at and decide what you're needing. So, with that in mind, I've got some more questions for journal prompts, but I want to see where you guys are at in terms of what you're feeling is useful for you. Do you want to spend some time, if you've got something in mind you could do the tango process with now for yourselves, or would you like me to give you a few more journal prompts?
I want you to go on.
Yeah, okay. So, I'm going to give you a couple more questions for your journals, either for now or to take away. So, where have you been using memory as a tool of creation?
Sorry, do you mean physically, where have you been? Or where have you been in your journey?
Where in your life, yeah, have you been? So, for example, with the repeating patterns, would be an example of that. Repeating patterns that don't serve you, that are maybe negative.
Which one's the question at the end?
Yeah, sure.
Could that be called triggers as well? Memory triggers? Is that what you were asking? Sorry.
So memory is a tool of creation. So where have you been from memory doing the same thing, so repeating the same patterns? So like repetitive, where something's become repetitive. Can I give another example?
So what do you find yourself repeating because of past trauma?
Yes, that's another way of putting it. Yeah. Yeah.
So that will probably be negative.
No, that's fine.
You need to create and evolve through that.
Yes.
If you
That's
need to
what
choose
you
new
do.
trauma
You're perfect.
or challenges in your life, what is there recognition from memory that actually there's a pattern that you're repeating because of that memory? It takes you, something happens and it takes you back to that past memory to make you think, oh God, I'm there again, or I may go there again. So,
I'll make sure I don't.
there we go, so avoidance.
Yeah.
That's why I think you're out there.
Yeah, that's a good one. That's a good example.
I'm all right there, that's very.
AV, OID, ANCE. So then you could ask yourself, am I avoiding it because it's too painful and I don't want to go there? Or am I avoiding it because of actually it wasn't, I don't need to do it again? Does that make sense? Yeah? Yeah, I was going to say, my intuition.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that is starting to get to the awareness, like Stella was saying, whether it's, you know, whether it's that fight or flight, isn't it? It's like,
Yeah,
that's good. That was a question about the memory.
Yeah. And
I'm
I
on that
had,
numbing stage
yeah,
himself.
amazing that you can resonate and see that way, because that's the first
I
biggest.
just don't bother. I'm not going there.
Yeah, so
Yeah,
you're,
I can relate to that. I do. People go, oh, I'm not afraid to be on my own. I'd rather be on my own than bother with anyone else. For example, that's just me avoiding it there.
yeah, so your memory as a tool of creation, not evolution there, example, is
I'm not really defensive.
I'm not doing it again, I'm not doing
Physically independent.
it again, rather than I can choose something different from my own newer, more aware state.
I'm more defensive now, if that makes sense. I'm not, don't need no one. I've got my own money, got everything, don't need anybody.
Yeah,
But we all need somebody.
Yeah, but
to
I'm not
get-
accepting
Oh, no,
anybody.
exactly, that's what I'm saying. So as
No.
human beings, you talk about connection, we need that connection. So at the moment,
I don't.
that fight or the fright thing, and that sort of is
Yeah.
where your trauma needs to be healed. Is that
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So this was a big one with me for a long time. I did this, like yours, a bit of avoidance, but I self-sabotage friendships, relationships, all sorts of things, because
Because I'm fiercely independent now, within reason.
yeah,
I tried to end a relationship and I was just like, oh, I can't bother. And I got ready.
yeah,
Because it's my way or no way. If you don't like it, get out. I used to be a bit more lenient, and now I'm like, no.
and I think it's such a process, isn't it? When we feel safe
I don't like
enough.
sharing my space or my time or anything anymore with another person apart from my daughter.
Carrie, I'm 25 years single. I'm still working through my trauma in terms of relationships. And
Yeah.
again, it's,
I'm
like
not
Stella
afraid.
said, it's that first step of awareness.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I don't know how to play.
because because at the moment, if you look at the terms of goals, because you don't know any different, you haven't experienced different. So it's like, again, it's your choice whether you want to stay where you are
take the
or
options,
whether
isn't
you
it?
want to move forward.
Yeah,
Well, it's better someone's part of me, to be fair, it's hard work. But that's because I'm just in my zone, in my own bubble. I don't know anything.
yeah, bless you. It's options, isn't it? It's when you're ready, if you want to.
I'll ever be ready, to be fair.
I said that.
Well, at least I know it's going to happen eventually. You know what I mean? There is a out.
But
But
Stella's already said, Carrie, you know, just the awareness. One for you being in this room, listening to Stella, you know, the awareness that you have, your self-awareness is such a brilliant start to anyone's
definitely.
journey.
Yeah, it's those little seeds that drop in. They start off, you know, I found like things start off as a silent whisper until I listen, and it becomes a shout, or it becomes, you know, something will show up, like, you know.
Or you get a rug pulled from underneath your feet, so
Yeah.
you might stop.
Yeah,
You've got no choice now but to think or to feel or,
yeah. And it's credit, like I was saying, I really mean that. It's credit to you guys for even being here, because we don't get into this work before we're ready. You know, we don't get into this work before we're in a safe enough space to be able to start to look at our traumas. You can't even look at them until you're in a solid space. It just won't come through because you're still in survival mode. So until which is credit to where you're at, because to be even stepping out of survival mode temporarily, just to have a little look sometimes at these things, is still credit to yourselves, because you obviously created your own safety, which is what we do after we haven't been shown that. We have to create our own. So it's massive to come to a point where you're in a safe enough space to even have these kind of discussions if you've been through trauma. So it really is credit to you. And I can't stress enough, I know this is lifelong work. You know, it's not like I'm stood here before you saying I'm healed, it's done. It won't ever be like that.
5 minutes.
Yeah, it's this, you know, and actually that's also the beauty of it, because there's more gifts in it as well. You know, for me, just to reel off a couple, it's been, you know, although I'm really sensitive, I'm also incredibly strong from my past. You know, that inner resilience, it is unshakable, and, you know, sense of humour and the optimism, and all of those things are my gifts from trauma. you'll have your own, and you might not always think of them. But there's a phenomenal amount. Like I was saying, it doesn't discount what's happened to us. It doesn't discount the event or that it was horrendous at the time, because those things are, and they need the appropriate time and care processing. But as a result, it might be maybe another journal prompt might be, what can you see that you've gained? What are your gifts of trauma? You know, if you're able to start thinking along those lines. So that would be, I think, my closing question to you is, if you don't know the answers now, to maybe sit with at another time when you feel in a safe space too. What are your gifts from trauma? Thank you.
Thank you.
Brilliant. Can I haven't asked her this question, but in terms of if anyone would like a follow-up coffee or chat with you
Absolutely.
as a one-to-one,
Yeah.
would you be available?
Absolutely. Yeah.
So again, whether it's sort of like a coffee shop visit or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah. So please do.
I'll give it again.
Yeah. As part of tidying up, we can fund that.
Yeah.
Lovely.
Yeah,
So,
no problem.
Thank you. I'll give it again. So if anything,
brilliant. Thank
I'd
you
like to
very
also-
much.
Okay. Yes, we're done.
Thank you.